Salut French 102 students, ça va? Bienvenue au vidéo 9 du chapitre 4. And what that means is that we are at the end of chapter 4. So we're about a quarter of the way through French 102 already. So we have just a couple of topics to look at here to wrap up chapter 4. We're basically talking about kind of 2.5 different topics, I guess you could say. We're going to look at les dates, and actually let's backtrack here a little bit to take a look at those. Now, les dates, we're also going to be looking at les moyens de transport, so different ways of transporting yourself to different places. And finally, the verbs prendre et venir, as they're kind of related to those means of transportation I just mentioned. Okay. So, talking about dates in French, you notice that the first thing that we're looking at here, a couple of questions that'll be useful for us, would be quelle est la date aujourd'hui? Or c'est quelle date aujourd'hui? So this literally means what is the date today? Or if we want to turn it into a different question with a little different word order, it is which date today. Okay, and the way that you would say that is c'est le premier, c'est le deux, c'est le trois, c'est le quatre, depending on which day of the month it is. Like, for example, aujourd'hui, c'est le 29 janvier. Okay, so that would be a way that you can practice saying the date. You can use today's date. Okay, so you can go ahead and jump in now in the pause in the video and record today's date. Okay, so you see that there are other months there that we can learn, of course. Janvier is just the first month of the year, January. Okay, we also have février, and you can repeat these as I say them without recording it. So, février, mars, the S is pronounced, avril, mai, juin, juillet, août, septembre, octobre, Novembre, Décembre. Okay, so those are all the months of the year to be familiar with in French. Notice a couple of them might go a little bit, or might be a little bit different from the pronunciation that you're used to. So for example, mars, the S is pronounced at the end. Mai sounds exactly like English May, it's very similar. Août, okay, the T is pronounced at the end, so those are a couple of things to be aware of. Okay, I could then ask, quelle est la date de la fête nationale française? Notice that the word fête looks a lot like festival. It's similar to festival in English. That's the word for holiday. So, quelle est la date de la fête nationale française? C'est le 14 juillet. That's basically the equivalent of the 4th of July. The American 4th of July in France is Bastille Day, the day of French independence from the monarchy, that it became a republic. Okay, so let's go on and look at a little bit more with dates. So there are a couple of ways to say dates in French. So for dates that are in the 1900s, you would begin with mille, because it's a 1 at the beginning of that year. So 1900. So it's kind of like learning the place value in math when you're in elementary school. So we begin with the thousands, mille, and then the hundreds, 900. Oops. Let's not reverse our numbers though. So, 1900, and then you go to the hundreds and the tens. 45. Okay, or 1945. So you can also say like 1900, 1945. So this really reminds me of what my children study with learning place value in elementary school. It's a good way to learn how to say these numbers in French. So 1945. 1945. Now that we're in the 2000s, of course, and we have been for a while, we begin with 2000 because we, of course, we're referring to 2000s. So 2019. Since at the time this book was published, it was probably 2019. Maintenant, c'est 2020. Okay, another important kind of cultural note to point out is that the day goes before the month in French. So if you see a date in France that looks like this, 14 refers to the day, 7 to the month, which would be July, and then the year follows it. So this would be Bastille Day back on its actual original day, July 14th, 1789. Oh, le 14 juillet 1799. Okay, and we can also talk about other things like your birthday, for example. So I could ask you the question, ton anniversaire, c'est quand? Notice anniversaire in French is not anniversary, it is birthday. Although your birthday is a type of anniversary too, it's celebrating an annual event, but we use the word anniversaire in French. Okay, so ton anniversaire c'est quand? And you would answer by saying for the month, you could say c'est en novembre, it's in the month of November. But when you're actually saying the specific day, then you'll use le. C'est le 18 novembre. So it is November 18th. Je vais faire une fête le 16 septembre, le 16 novembre. So I'm going to have a party on November 16th. Okay, so I could say for myself, mon anniversaire, c'est le 24 octobre. It's October 24th. All right, so what about you? When is your birthday? Ton anniversaire, c'est quand? So you can go ahead and tell me which day is your birthday. Okay, and I can also use en in addition to putting it before a month, like c'est en novembre, I can use it before a whole year. And I think the reason for this is because a month is a pretty long period of time. A year is even a longer period of time. So in or en kind of represents that length of time. So, en quelle année vas-tu finir tes études? Okay, en 2022, in 2022. Okay, so I could ask you the same question. When do you expect to finish your studies? When are you going to graduate? En quelle année vas-tu finir tes études? All right, so now you know a little bit more about how to express dates in French. Now let's move on to the forms of transportation. Okay, les moyens de transport. All right, so Robert et ses amis vont aller à la Nouvelle-Orléans en voiture. Et vous, comment préférez-vous voyager? Voyager is the verb for to travel. So how do you prefer to travel? Okay, so pour visiter une autre ville, to visit another city, je préfère y aller. Remember, y means there. I prefer to travel there. And we're going to use this preposition en for all of these. So, en avion, by plane, en train, in a train, en bateau, by boat, en car, autocar. This is really like a long distance bus. I know in British English, they often refer to this as a coach to distinguish it from a bus, like a city bus. I don't know that we really have that distinction in American English. We usually just say like a long distance bus, like a Greyhound bus, I think. Okay, so if you were going to visit another city, which way would you prefer to go? Okay, moi, je préfère y aller en avion. I prefer to go by plane because it's a little faster. So, vous, pour visiter une autre ville, qu'est-ce que tu préfères? Tu préfères y aller en avion, en train, en bateau ou en autocar? Okay, So let's look at some other means of transportation, moyens de transport. So, il y a d'autres possibilités pour aller en ville. There are other possibilities to go in the city. Comment venez-vous en cours? Venez might be a new verb for you. It is coming from the verb venir. Okay, so just to point that out and give you a little preview to it in case it is new for you, and it just means to come. Okay, so how do you come to class? So imagine you're going to your face-to-face in-person classes on campus. How do you do that? And you would say, je viens. So that is the conjugated form of venir that goes with je, I. So I come to class. How? Je viens en cours à pied. Oh, I walk to class. Je viens à vélo. I ride my bike. Je viens en taxi. I take a taxi. That probably wouldn't happen at Lander so much since we're a smaller community, but if you went to school in a big city, you might do that. Je viens en voiture. I think a lot of students do that. Je viens en métro, so that would be like a subway or a public transit system in a large city. Or finally, je viens en bus, autobus. So this would be different from car, autocar that we saw on the previous slide. That would be like a city bus, a local bus. Okay, vous, comment venez-vous en cours? How do you come to class? You can tell me your preferred way of coming to class. Moi, je viens en cours en voiture. I travel from the Greenville area, so that's my only choice. But what about you? Comment vous venez en cours? Okay, and we'll wrap up our final video here by taking a look at these verbs prendre et venir. So if you're going to conjugate them, they would look like the chart in the middle of the slide here. Prendre is to take, venir is to come. Okay, so if I'm conjugating these, I would say je prends, tu prends, il, elle, on prend, nous prenons, vous prenez, ils, elles prennent. So that sounds a bit different from the others. Okay, and venir, I guess you could say it follows kind of a similar pattern in terms of pronunciation. Je viens, tu viens, il, elle, on vient, nous venons, vous venez, ils, elles viennent. So notice that ils prennent, ils viennent is a little bit similar. It follows a similar pattern. Okay, so as I mentioned above, prendre means to take. Je prends des notes en cours. Oh, I take notes in class. Prenons le métro. Here you see the imperative or command form. This would actually be like a suggestion. Prenons le métro would mean let's take the metro. Okay, and we can see some distinction between the uses of prendre and venir right here. So you use prendre to say that you're taking a means of transportation. You can also use aller, venir, or voyager to say that you're going, coming, or traveling by a particular means of transportation. So I could say, je prends le métro, I'm taking the metro. Je prends l'avion, I'm taking a plane. Okay, j'y vais en métro, I'm going there by metro. You could also say, je prends le métro. I think that would be fine too. Je voyage en avion. Et je prends l'avion. That's possible for both. Je prends or je voyage. Je viens en cours à pied. I'm coming to class on foot or walking. We don't really say on foot in English so much. That's the way that usually translates, but you would usually just say I walk to class. But in French, the literal translation would be I'm coming to class on foot, à pied. All right, and finally, We can also use the verb prendre to talk about having something to eat or drink. So, je vais prendre un sandwich et une eau minérale, or je prends un sandwich et une eau minérale. You could use it either the je vais form or je prends. Comprendre, apprendre are the same conjugation as prendre. Comprendre is to understand, apprendre is to learn. Okay, so I can say, j'apprends à parler français. I'm learning to speak French. Ma sœur apprend le français aussi. Tu comprends? Okay, my sister is learning to speak French too. Do you understand? Okay, venir, as we already learned, means to come. So revenir, to come back, devenir, to become, are the same form as venir. Vous revenez tard et il devient impatient. So you come back late and he's getting impatient. Okay, so for now, the main thing to know about these verbs is how to conjugate them. Be aware that we can use them when we're talking about forms of transportation. And one means, basically, if we look back over here, one means to take a form of transportation, and another one means that you're coming or arriving somewhere by taking a certain means of transportation. Okay, so that wraps up Chapter 4. On finit. So next week we'll be moving on to Chapitre 5. You'll be taking the first exam of Chapitre 4. Any questions you have about MindTap activities, grammar questions, vocabulary questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email or drop by office hours. À bientôt! À la prochaine!